nag-assure po ang NTC na magagrant siya ng provisional permit. Tumiwala tayo. Under oath, sinabi niya. Hindi po acceptable sa akin na isang opisyal ng gobyerno, lolokohin po tayo in a public hearing under oath, pati Senado. Kung sinabi na lang niya po na hindi niya bibigyan yan noong March 10, then this Congress, the Speaker, the leaders of the House could have decided what actions we should take para either hindi magsira or mag-schedule ng marathon hearings. But alam mo, yung ginawa ng NTC talaga, mali.
Mr. Speaker, with the initial action taken by the House last week in regard to our resolve to grant a provisional franchise to ABS-CBN, may I please know whether we receive a formal letter of appreciation from the officers of ABS-CBN Corporation?
Mr. Speaker, I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar of any letter being received from ABS or any other organization with regards to the House bill we passed on second reading last week, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
But you are certain, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, that we have not formally received any letter of appreciation. I think the record would show.
Mr. Speaker, as far as my office is concerned, I cannot answer for maybe if they address it in the House or the Speaker's office. But in my case, as sponsor, I have not received any letter from any organization, Your Honor, Mr. Speaker.
Are you in a position, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, to determine today whether the House of Representatives received any such kind of letter today or in the past?
Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, I'm not in a position. I think the Secretary General or the Secretariat can affirm or confirm when there's such a letter. Especially during this pandemic, most letters are sent through email, not through slow mail. So I'm not in a position, Your Honor, Mr. Speaker, to confirm or deny the question of the Honorable Deputy Speaker.
I'm asking these questions, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, because I believe this bill is for their benefit, and ordinarily, ordinary people, and even ordinary people wouldn't hesitate to extend an appreciation for something that will benefit him. In the case of ABS-CBN, its silence probably would mean, Mr. Speaker, that they will be reluctant to even send a letter of appreciation to the initiative taken by the whole House of Representatives. This means, Mr. Speaker, to me, that ABS-CBN is not interested in the action initiated by the House, despite the fact that the rules, as we know, have been relaxed to facilitate this provisional franchise. Would you feel that way, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor?
I cannot speak for ABS, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. But, reading to the newspaper comments, especially those in favor of ABS, some were happy, some were not. Because those happy were saying that at least they can operate for 5 months while the franchise is being heard. Iba naman, sinasabi, bakit 5 months lang? Bakit hindi 25 years? So, I cannot speak for them, but mixed reactions. Yung yung mga kontra naman, merong sinasabing maganda yan, mayroon nagalit dahil sabi ipasara na. So, at this point, importante talaga that we should judge whether to approve or deny based on the merits, based on the hearing, not because of what outside forces, media are saying. Because it's our constitutional duty and mandate to hear all sides and decide based on what we hear. So, Your Honor, Deputy Speaker, alam nyo po, kahit anong gawin ng Congress ngayon, ay merong mag-o-oppose, may mag-o-kontra, at napakahirap ng isatisfy both pro and against. So, my advice really is just hear this extensively and let us decide freely and objectively, Your Honor, Mr. Speaker.
Sir Speaker, Your Honor, the reason that I insist on this question, referring specifically to ABS-CBN officials, because I will not be happy, Mr. Speaker, if ABS-CBN, despite the grant of a provisional franchise on a silver platter, will still choose to lock down operations on the ground that it did not ask for such temporary authority in the first place. I will not like to see the Congress to be placed in that situation, Mr. Speaker. That is why I feel that this question is very important.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The objective of the temporary permit provisional franchise is basically to give Congress ample time to have an impartial, extensive hearing first, for ABS to be able to operate while we are hearing, while we are deliberating. So that is just the intention. But if they ask me and the sponsors, if we are for and against, we have to decide. Personally, I have not decided whether I'm for or against. I just want to hear all sides first. And that is the main rationale of the bill that we have filed, Your Honor, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, this representation believes that Speaker Alan Cayetano is correct in initiating this bill. First, this will prove what he has been asserting from the beginning, that Congress is not out to shut down ABS-CBN, although it must bear with us for the moment due to the interference of more pressing problems that we need to prioritize, like the present pandemic. Do you agree, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor?
I agree 100% with the stand of the Speaker, his statements that napakarami pong nangyari sa ating bansa. Nagkaroon ng taal, COVID na hindi naman natin inaasahan. Nag-assure po ang NTC na magagrant siya ng provisional permit. Tumiwala tayo, under oath, sinabi niya. Hindi po acceptable sa akin na isang opisyal ng gobyerno, lolokohin po tayo in a public hearing, under oath, pati Senado. Kung sinabi na lang niya po na hindi niya bibigyan yan noong March 10, then this Congress, the Speaker, the leaders of the House could have decided what actions we should take para either hindi magsira or mag-schedule ng marathon hearings. But alam mo, yung ginawa ng NTC talaga, mali. So knowing that, nag-file tayo ng bill to have a provisional franchise. But then again, binalik natin po sa plenaryo, sa second reading, so that we can further discuss. Marami pang gusto magsalita, mag-interpolate, mag-propose ng amendments. It only shows that this leadership wants to ensure due process, fairness, impartiality. So yan lang po, ako po ay saludo sa ating liderato, particularly kay Speaker Alan Cayetano.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. In fact, Speaker Cayetano intimated on the floor last week that several fundamental issues surrounding the application for franchise renewal of ABS-CBN are these allegations of tax frauds, violation of labor laws, election laws, and even possible constitutional infringement. And the Speaker thought that this must be looked into seriously. Do you agree, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor?
Tama po, kasi ang daming issue labor laws, alleged labor laws that have been violated. We should hear people alleging this, and we should also hear ABS. What is their side? Alleged constitutional laws violated, like ownership. The Constitution is very clear. Media, particularly, should be 100% be Filipino-owned. Election laws violated. Tax laws violated. Kailangan po lahat ng mga yan pakinggan sa isang malawakan na pandinig at hearing para talagang marinig lahat. Then let ABS also defend themselves to counter whatever allegations that will come out during the hearings at hindi talaga yan mareresolba sa 1-2 araw. May ano kasi iba nagsasabi dyan na paspasan nyo na yan. Alam nyo, pag paspasan natin yan, hindi natin ginagampanan ng ating constitutional duty to ensure fairness and objectivity. At pag ipasa natin to ng mabilis na panahon, yung sinasabing equal protection, paano naman yung ibang mga nag-a-apply ng prangkisa na ordinaryong radio station na umaabot ng 3 taon, 5 taon, samantalang gusto natin pagbigyan dahil allegedly media giant. So, importante talaga, malawakang hearing, impartial, due process, ibigay sa lahat, for or against. Your Honor, Mr. Speaker.
As an example of these allegations, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, based on the 2018 audited financial statement of ABS-CBN Corporation, it has pending legal cases in courts. We need to know the nature of these cases, whether criminal, civil, or tax-related cases, and their respective status. Personally, Mr. Speaker, this representation wants to know the status of the case appealed by ABS-CBN in the Supreme Court involving some 103 of its workers referred to as talents and who were terminated by this company without just cause. Do you agree, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor?
Tama po yan. Ako rin po nakareceive sa aking opisina na naglalaad, nagsasabi, nagdidetalye na pag nag-shooting raw ng teleserye sa ABS ay minsan lumalampas ng 24 hours, which is definitely against labor laws. Ang tinanong ko, bakit yan? Dahil ang bayad raw sa kanila is per day, so sinasagad talaga yung 24 hours. So meron din na senior citizen, may mga extra, TV crew. So ito po ang mga bagay na dapat marinig ng tao. Yung issue ng press freedom, definitely, hindi naman totoo po yan. Kahit dimatihin natin yan. Dahil as we speak, alam nyo naman na expired na ang franchise ng ABS and yet they continue to operate through YouTube, through Facebook. Napapanood mo pa rin ng ANC, napapanood mo pa rin ng ABS News Channel. So there's the issue on press freedom and freedom of expression definitely is not valid, and press freedom and freedom of expression is stronger now than ever. So tama po ang mga punto na sinasabi ng ating kagalang-galang na Deputy Speaker Marcoleta na dapat itong mga akusasyon marinig at pakinggan rin natin ng ABS na sagutin.
Records also show that the BIR, Mr. Speaker, sued ABS-CBN and its 2 subsidiaries, ABS-CBN Film Production, Inc. and ABS-CBN Publishing. In all the 5 cases lodged in the Court of Tax Appeals, ABS-CBN entered into compromise agreements with the BIR. In one case, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, docketed as case number 9411, ABS-CBN entered into a judicial compromise with the BIR, paying the amount of 152,437,330 pesos and 93 centavos. We need to know why ABS-CBN needed to be first sued by the BIR before it settles its fiscal obligations in apparent violation of Section 8 of its old franchise, which it now seeks to renew. Do you agree, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor?
I agree 100%. This is part of the hearings that what you want to conduct. Kailangan marinig po to yung pinunto po ng ating Deputy Speaker Marcoleta, yung case sa Court of Tax Appeals involving 152 million, yung kaso sa Supreme Court na involving 103 workers, yung issue on citizenship, and many more. I agree 100% na ito po ay dapat pakinggan, dapat marinig natin ano bang nature ng case, anong status ng case, anong laws na na-violate. Yan po ang mga importante. At bigyan rin natin ng ABS ng oras para sagutin to. Pero ulitin natin, mangyari lang po itong lahat na minimension ng ating Honorable Deputy Speaker Marcoleta kung magkaroon po ng isang extensive, comprehensive, impartial hearing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, ABS-CBN does not deny that Lopez Incorporated, one of its major stockholders, transferred 132 million ABS-CBN Corporation shares to its alter ego, the ABS-CBN Holdings Corporation, before the closing of its offering of 132 million Philippine Depositary Receipts, or PDRs, underlying the shares on September 29, 1999. I believe this is the reason why the Solicitor General commenced a co-warrant of proceeding against ABS-CBN. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, that our Committee on Legislative Franchises sought sample copies of these PDRs from ABS-CBN Corporation?
I'm not, I don't have the information, but definitely when we conduct hearings, dapat po ay isabpi na po yung mga documents na yan, malaman ng mga
Mr.
miyembro.
Speaker, but do you know that instead of a representative from ABS-CBN, a representative from ABS Holding Corporation instead was the one who submitted a PDR form, not a sample PDR issued by the holding company. This is not only insulting, Mr. Speaker. They are bent on hiding something.
Tama po yan, dapat
request
malaman
of
talaga
being
ng publiko
able
po
to
yan.
see what a PDR looks like. Maybe because of curiosity, our Committee on Franchises asked them to please present Xerox copies of these PDRs. There are 132 million PDRs issued. Not even one they are able to present as a sample copy. What they did present is a sample form, Mr. Speaker.
Tama po yan, lahat po yan dapat isabpi na, i-present sa committee, malaman ng publiko to help us decide freely and objectively. Napakarami pa po niyan mga tanong na yan. May nang nagsasabi nga, na nag-apply nga raw sila ng franchise noong 16 Congress, 2014-16, pero nung hiningian rin sila ng mga dokumento, hindi rin po nag-submit. So ito dapat nalalaman ng publiko, but this 18 Congress, we will make sure that all sides will be heard, all documents requested should be submitted, or else we will cite them for contempt, both for and against, Your Honor, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. Mr. Speaker, a Philippine Depositary Receipt, or PDR, is a security which grants the holder the right to delivery of sale of the underlying share. It consists of a deposit price and an option price. An option price is considered as payment when the buyer opts to exercise his option of converting the PDRs to ABS-CBN corporate shares. Each PDR issued by ABS-CBN Holdings at the consideration of 46 pesos, consisting of a deposit of 45 and 90 centavos and PDR option of 10 cents each. The PDR, Mr. Speaker, has all the marks or attributes of ownership, possession, enjoyment, and disposition. Mr. Speaker, it appears that the power to trigger the disposition of these 132 million ABS-CBN shares was already transferred to the holders of these PDRs. Many of these have fallen into the hands of foreigners. At the very least, Mr. Speaker, there is a need to pierce the veil of corporate fiction of ABS-CBN Holdings to expose this scheme. Would you agree to me, Mr. Speaker?
Yung mga punto po ng ating kagalang-galang na Deputy Speaker ay talagang dapat mailabas po yan sa lahat sa hearing. Napakadetalyado po ng inyong mga binibigay na impormasyon. So dapat po talaga ay masubmit po yan, masubpino po ang ABS regarding that para masagot rin po natin ang mga katanungan na lumalabas po, particularly minention po ni Deputy Speaker Marcoleta.
Mr. Speaker, there is a Latin maxim which reads, quando alicid ex directo prohibitur et per oblicum, which means that what cannot be legally done directly cannot be done indirectly. Mr. Speaker, we need to ascertain that these PDRs are not being utilized as legal subterfuge in order to make illusory the all-Filipino requirement of the Constitution on the ownership and management of mass media outfits. Do you agree, Mr. Speaker? Your Honor?
So, Mr. Speaker, regarding yung mga issues po na nire-raise ni Deputy Speaker Marcoleta, I think we should fully note all this information, and this will help this body decide kung tama ba talagang bigyan ng prangkisa o hindi. At papasalamat kami kay Congressman Marcoleta dahil alam mo, sa media, puro pabor ang naririnig natin sa ABS. Samantalang marami naman palang mga issue, particularly labor, tax, constitutional, which were all raised by Deputy Speaker. So I think siguro lahat ng mga pro and against, dapat lalong lumakas ng loob na magsalita, magpadala ng position paper sa Kongreso, mag-participate sa hearing. Yan talaga ang main objective nitong discussion natin, na mabigyan lahat ng due process. So, magaganda po ang mga puntong nilalabas po ni Deputy Speaker Marcoleta. And we duly note all this information and cases filed against ABS that we will have to tackle at the proper time during committee deliberations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of the four stockholder corporations that own Lopez, Inc., which is the majority stockholder of ABS-CBN Corporation, two of them admitted in their documents submitted to the Committee on Legislative Franchises that they are not wholly owned Filipino, including the dubious PCD Nominee Corporation, another major owner of ABS-CBN, which apparently represents the interests of PDR holders. Don't you think we need to scrutinize this issue more properly, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor?
Malinaw po yan sa Constitution, Article 16, Section 11. The ownership and management of mass media shall be limited to citizens of the Philippines. So, we have to determine whether the ABS-CBN violated this constitutional provision such that some of its owners are not Filipino citizens. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also believe that the House needs to inquire on the issues revolving around the sequestration of mass media outfits in April 1986, including BBC Channel 2, now ABS-CBN Corporation, and the eventual return of ABS-CBN to the Lopezes. One of the objectives of Executive Order Number 11 of then-President Cory Aquino was to settle the question of the true ownership of these media outfits, including that of ABS-CBN Channel 2. Surprisingly, Mr. Speaker, the PCGG has no records on the arbitration between the government and the ABS-CBN before the Board of Arbitration and the events that transpired leading to or after the turnover of the ABS-CBN. Do you agree, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor?
Tama po yan. Meron rin po akong nabasa niyan at marami rin po akong nakitang mga dokumento that ABS-CBN was already owned by the government, and when then President Cory Aquino took over as president under a revolutionary government, for some reason, with no public bidding, no right process, it was awarded back to the Lopez family. So we have to investigate, we have to know the truth, what transpired during those times and how it was returned to the Lopez family. These are questions that have arisen and have to be tackled with during committee deliberations. Hindi po to alam ng publiko kasi palaging sinasabi it was sequestered, taken away from them during the administration of then President Marcos. But there were also reports that they were paid for. Binayaran po sila at nabayaran po sila, and yet, noong 1986, it was returned to them. So these are questions that have to be answered. The public should know the truth about this. It's not commonly being discussed. That's why it's incumbent upon this Congress to have an open, transparent hearing so that people will hear this, even members of Congress. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
There are other persistent allegations, Mr. Speaker, on the fraudulent use of tax shields by ABS-CBN, like deferred tax assets, especially the NCIP, and the net operation loss carryover or NOLCO, to arrive at a meager tax payment to the government. We need also to verify the claim of ABS-CBN that in 2018 it had a revenue loss of 22 billion, together with its reported losses in production costs 13.6 billion, cost of sales 2.4 billion, cost of services 29 million, and general and administration services 7.1 billion, which allegedly resulted to an operating loss of 432 million. Do you agree, Mr. Speaker, that we need to look into these allegations more properly?
Definitely, these are revealing, blatant allegations that have to be discussed in an open hearing, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor.
Finally, Mr. Speaker, we need to look into the allegation that Mr. Gabby Lopez III, the Chairman Emeritus of ABS-CBN Corporation, was an American citizen at the time he took over the reins of this mass media giant. Again, this is because of the strict provision of our Constitution on media ownership and management. Never mind, Mr. Speaker, that the ABS-CBN persistently claims that this is a closed case. They argue that Mr. Gabby Lopez is both an American citizen and a Filipino citizen. He having born with Filipino parents and having born in America under the jus soli principle. So they think, Mr. Speaker, that Mr. Gabby Lopez is a lucky guy, he being a Filipino citizen at the same time an American citizen. But we all know, Mr. Speaker, that when you reach the age of majority, it's up to you to select your own citizenship. And by the fact that he was using American passport, Mr. Speaker, I think Mr. Gabby Lopez chose to be an American citizen than being a Filipino. Do you believe, Mr. Speaker, that the United States will grant him a passport without renouncing his Filipino citizenship?
Importante po talaga na masagot itong mga tanong na to dahil as mentioned earlier, the Constitution clearly states that ownership and management of mass media shall be limited to the citizens of the Philippines. Meron po ako nabasa, tama po yung sinabi ni D.S. Marcoleta na gumagamit po ng American passport si Mr. Gabby Lopez. In fact, na-detail po doon yung flight number, passport number, when it was used, what country, when they entered. So, kailangan, at ito naman, sa kabilang panig naman, dinideny naman po ng ABS-CBN na hindi totoo. So, kailangan talagang pakinggan. And the best proof for this, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor, is yung documentary evidence. So, pag sinampi na yan, Bureau of Immigration, US government, at mapatunayan talaga na hindi siya Filipino citizen, then it will help members of Congress to decide na nag-violate siya ng constitutional law at it will help us decide whether to grant or deny the franchise. Ngayon, sa isang panig naman, kung napatunayan naman nilang hindi yan si American citizen, then it will also help us decide whether to grant or deny. So, again, we need an impartial, comprehensive hearing, giving due process to all sides. yung mga informasyon na sinasabi ni DS Marcoleta ay dapat lang ilatag po yan sa hearing. Salamat po, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, you might have noticed that I am asking these questions for the simple reason of conveying to our members and the public at large that there are very serious allegations surrounding the renewal of franchise of ABS-CBN, and that Congress should not lessen or loosen its guard in being able to exercise its oversight powers before it grants a very important permit to operate to mass media subject to the limitations given to us by our Constitution. I'd like to thank you, Mr. Sponsor, and thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, our colleagues, for your time and attention. Thank you very much.